Well, greetings and welcome to the VR walking tour of the Dolphin. There's not much point looking at it down here because my suspicion is that when passengers get in and out, they'll be up there. So let's get our butts up there and then I'll show you around the ship. Alright, so here we are as always in the familiar position of the captain's chair, but we're stepping out of that immediately to say hello to Commander Headless and then to have a look around this not particularly large or in fact well detailed interior. But then again, from the space school bus, there's not much that you could really expect, I wouldn't imagine. So if we start at the front, one thing you'll notice very quickly that's different to the previous ships is that this is much more shiny and polished, and even the displays have kind of got like a bent display kind of polish to them. In fact, as you can see there, they sort of start over there in the corner and come all the way down here, which is very unusual for a display, but certainly something that gives it the sort of signature Saud-Kruger feel. Over here we have a display that shows a thing in extremely low pixel count or low resolution, so you can't really make out what it says. It just ran into something. And a blue one over here that's similar. Now there's a bit of gold piping over here, which is interesting, and it sort of separates the different parts of the dash. Over the front here we have some paneling which just has some lights in it, fairly uninteresting, and the top of the dash, which looks much more like a car dash than many of the other previous ships, with this sort of hood and shade over the top, which is quite interesting. Now in terms of the nose, we are in the nose, so there is no bonnet or more things that come out from the canopy that you can see out here. So here the edges you can see are very shiny, both underneath and on the sides here where the canopy actually goes up. But we are right at the front. What's interesting is that we're kind of pushed back into the ship from the outside. If you look at it, it's very smooth. But here, there's kind of like a bit of a pushback here, only a few inches at the front, but up to sort of 1.5 to 2 feet up the top of that post. So that's kind of interesting way that they've hidden the cockpit, I suppose, from view. And as I say, underneath here, there's just a sort of like a big giant bowl or bathtub shape. Very strange. And if we head back inside, the main projector here for the starport services and other menus is actually really, really large. It's much larger than the previous ship's ones. I'd say this one's probably a good 80 centimeters across, fairly large. And then over here we have a smaller version. So these are smaller projectors, but the images on either side here and here are about the right scale for all the other ships. And again, this display for the ship itself is about the size of a regular sized dinner plate. And under here, under the dash hood, there is literally nothing. And if we look underneath to see if there's anything there, there's sort of like a pinky material kind of highlight, which is a sort of a metallic pink. Yeah, there's sort of like a metallic pink rim that you can see here, and it goes around underneath the dashboard. I don't know what that's supposed to be. Now over on the other side, you can also see the same console and bent display as there is over there on the other side, and again more gold detailing separating the two from each other, but it is an absolute mirror image of the other side, so nothing particularly interesting there, and again you can't read it. Some pink lights down there and a repeat of the previous side's dash. So fairly boring in terms of the front, both from when you're sitting in it in the captain's seat or the commander's chair and when you're actually exploring it up close. But it is very shiny. It's obviously meant to symbolize a status. Now, if we walk in towards the rear of this cabin section, there is obviously a fire extinguisher there on the wall, and there is a panel up there that says something, but it's very low res and you can't really tell what it says. If you get up close to this panel here, you'll see, well, you can't actually read what it says because it is probably the lowest text or lowest resolution texture I've actually yet to see in any of these ships. It's horrendous. But on the side here you can see some sort of storage cabinets, maybe housing for a mainframe or something of that nature, and the entire thing is fairly high, probably only comes up to about here. I've kind of had to adjust my height to make this work, and a bit of a storage cabin like an overhead locker but upside down, probably for crew materials or, you know, the commander's lunchbox. And if we come to this large rear panel, again, it is unfortunately not clear and we can't really tell what it's supposed to signify. I guess the status of something, but And maybe that looks like a starport, I'm not really sure, but it's not particularly clear in terms of what it's trying to indicate. But it's kind of sat here in a console kind of configuration, which makes me think that somebody is supposed to be back here sort of operating it, but obviously it's not a multi-crewed vessel, so I'm not sure who exactly would be doing that. The flooring in here is interesting as well, because it's the first ship that we get to see with some carpeted sort of textured material, but it doesn't look particularly plush. It just seems to be maybe some sort of artificial nylon kind of carpeting. We can also see that the commander's chair doesn't move in any way. It's also on a stationary platform. And here it's interesting, you can see the difference really between the ship in cockpit mode, where this entire black section is missing, and you can see the indentations from the size of the ship, whereas if you flick back through to the normal mode, that entire thing is covered like as if you had a motorcycle visor that comes out over the front, which is, I guess, a way to do it, but it's kind of a bit strange, especially in this configuration. It looks really weird with that sort of empty bit of grey there up the top. Now, I think I've positioned myself far enough that I could be touching the side of the commander's seat here up the top and the headrest, and I should be able to make it to the rear door there, but we'll see what happens. So again, obviously walking along here is very boring because there's nothing happening. Over here we can see another fire extinguisher, which is just sitting there in the wall. It's exactly the same fire extinguisher as in the Asp Explorer and in the SRV, just approximately 1.5 foot in length over here. And up there is a panel that I can't get any closer to, but clearly that seems to indicate a galaxy map of some description. This is, after all, a passenger ship, so probably denoting destinations where we're going, and some other status kind of indicator, which again is not super clear in terms of what it indicates, nor is that one over there in the corner. And then here the detail sort of continues to be fairly low, but again very high-end sort of metallics. Here is another bent display, which could show something, who knows, and another bent display on the other side, which seems to indicate maybe a touchpad, keypad kind of situation in order to get through the door. Speaking of the door, let's walk through it, shall we? It's very plain. It just says South Kruger, and that's it. All right, through we go. So what's really interesting here is that we are faced immediately with the landing gear of the Dolphin. So there would need to be some way for us to get in here, but there is clearly enough room for there to be some sort of entry ramp, or indeed a corridor that goes around past the landing gear and here in front to then enter into this offset door to go back into the cabin area. So it's clearly possible. It'll just be interesting to see how they actually make it happen. The landing gear itself is about 2 stories from bottom to top, and those landing struts, as always, are huge. The pistons driving the hydraulics there are about the thickness of a thigh, so it's actually really, really thick. But as you can see, there's no way to get into the Dolphin from this particular perspective. And from here, it's interesting to see the shape that you can see there, just see-through, of the top dome of the Dolphin and how far back it actually goes. Really hard to judge the distance though, because we can't see through that dang landing gear. As far as I can get through to the wall, and you can see the rear landing gear there, and the cargo bay just in front of the landing gear there, and the side paneling on the Dolphin heading back about 20 to 30 meters from where it begins over there with the point. So certainly enough space for a lot of passengers to fit into. I would say it is double the width of a standard city bus and about double the length from front to back. So I would suggest it could probably fit feasibly in sort of economy class kind of sitting about 150 people. Of course, that doesn't reflect in the game, but that's kind of the scale of what it looks like. And of course, don't forget, you've got to fit all the other stuff in there, like hardpoints and the landing gear retraction and the cargo bay and the FSD and so on and so forth. So it's not quite as simple as saying it's an entirely empty space. But from here, it's certainly large enough to fit a large number of passengers. It's also interesting to look at it from this perspective and note that there are clearly 2 levels of this thing. However, in looking at the ship from the inside as we did before, you can see that that bottom level would only really be a couple of seats on the outside at the absolute maximum, because there's all that stuff on the interior. And that door there that you can see with the square window would probably be a cargo window rather than a passenger window, or passenger door I should say. So it's not super clear how the passengers would actually get inside, but it seems like the bottom would probably be taken up with the systems of the ship and cargo, and the passengers would be up the top there. I wonder, I've got an idea. Now, very much in the spirit of don't try this at home, kids, I'm a trained professional. I've stuck my head through the cockpit so you can see up above, and you can see through that grey area that we couldn't see through at the start. There is this little section here, and above it is that dome that sort of curves. So yes, there would definitely be a great view out the front. It sits right above the cockpit. You may even be able to see bits of the cockpit as you are sitting up there. But that whole upper area would definitely be a great place to sit and get a great view as you sort of tootle about. So here we're standing pretty much just underneath what I think is the cargo bay, just here. Or perhaps it could be the passenger entry, because there's no other real doors that come down. But clearly this would open down towards the ground, and there'd be a set of stairs that come out. Over here we can see the entry to the cargo bay, just sort of jutting out underneath. I'm not sure if you can see the texture in 2D, but the reflections are glitching the heck out of themselves. And there we have the front landing gear and the two small hard points. So yeah, if you get into a fight with this thing, just run. And here I'm nearly standing on the ground, and I could definitely touch that round panel there, but I am about a foot off the ground. So in theory, if you're standing, there'd be enough clearance that you wouldn't be able to touch the actual panels underneath the ship, perhaps the underside of the cargo bay, and that's about it. And here we have a bit of a view of the underside thrusters on one of the wings. So you can see it's got a bit of a grated kind of texture to it under there, and that the entire thing is mounted on, well, it kind of looks like on a floating kind of bracket system, which would allow it to move in any direction that it would please, which is kind of interesting the way that is done. And that cargo hatch there, I haven't found any other doors on the outside of this thing, so this must be the way that everything, including you, gets in and out of the ship. And the only other way that I could see it working is there's a large hatch just there in front of us, which could potentially open up and let people and cargo in. So that's probably the only other way that I can see this thing actually happening. All right, so there's your quick look at the interior of the Dolphin inside and out. Bit of a strange sort of interior, clearly designed as a passenger vessel and not much else. Not my favorite ship, but I want to do all of the Saud-Kruger ships, so it's the smallest one, so I thought we'd start there. I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for your comments and your interactions, and of course your subscriptions. YouTube doesn't care about channels until they get to 1,000, so that's my next aim. So I really appreciate everyone that subscribes, because then you get closer to that 1,000 subs, and that's at that point where YouTube kind of considers that you now vaguely exist. So if you haven't subscribed already, please hit the subscribe button. If you're regularly on any ED forums or anything like that where you're discussing Elite Dangerous or VR, grab the URL from this video, chuck it into those forums, say, hey, this guy does some stuff and it's kind of cool every now and then. And that would really help me out to sort of widen the audience. So I appreciate all of you who have done that already, and if you can keep that going, that would be really awesome. Thank you. In the meantime, I'm looking to do all of the rest of the ships of Elite Dangerous. Also, the fighters are coming up. So there's lots of cool stuff that's coming up for you guys to have a look at, and I'm really excited to bring those to you. So yes, I will be doing the full range of all of the ships within Elite Dangerous, and probably some other cool stuff as well. So thanks as always for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Fly safe, Commanders.